Welcome to Musicians Peer Support, everybody. Today we're welcoming Jon Altham. Everybody in the room, let's give it up one more time for Jon Altham. Thank you so much, Jon, for being here. Am I pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yes, we've known each other for a few years now, but I always make sure. So Jon, thank you so much for being here. You're doing okay?
Yeah, doing great, thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Before we dig into the content of what we're here to talk about, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about who you are and your backgrounds. You grew up as a musician?
Yes, I started off playing the drums, then saxophone, guitar, and self-taught production from there. Went to artist management, and then found myself within film and dived into music even more from there. So I've seen many different sides of the industry, I guess.
Yeah.
Now,
So you've served as like in music supervision roles. You know about what it takes to produce a film and
yep,
things like
yep.
that, right?
Yeah, everything from music supervision to all the metadata off the back end in terms of publishing, record labels, distribution, you name it. The full cycle of music production, as it were, including an artist's career. I've touched different bits of that throughout the journey.
Yeah. And a lot of what we talked about in the early days of Clubhouse was lifestyle and the emotional and kind of mental health type aspect of what goes on as an artist in our
Mhm.
lives. And so this book has a tell us about where this book came about, actually, please.
Sure. It's a title that I've had for quite some time, but hadn't got round to fully executing on it. Um, I guess really where it came from was to provide a bit of a working document because I had an itch for artist management again. Um, I noticed there were a few rising star artists in the UK in particular. At the moment, a lot of female artists that are really, really strong. And I was like, you know what, I'd love to get back into artist management. And then I was like, I don't have the time. I literally cannot do it, unfortunately. So I thought, well, why not write a book? And why not write a series of books that would help an artist navigate their entire career, from the initial foundations, all the way to managing technology, automation and systems, you name it, all the way to the back end of hopefully leaving a legacy and giving back out of your music. And that's where it all came from. So this first book in particular is really about let's strip all the illusion of this industry away because there's a lot of it. And let's get back down to the core. Like, what does it actually mean to be an artist? What does it mean to kind of navigate yourself through this career? And more importantly, doing it in a way that aligns with you and your values. Because quite often I found that unfortunately people may have had success in the industry, but they ended up losing themselves in the process. And hopefully, my aim of this is that that stops that from happening, and people can negotiate, deal with deals, and progress their own path that is aligned to them and their goals. That's the aim.
Wow. And just for people watching the replay and also in the room, I just want to remind you, Jon did one class with us with Musicians Peer Support. It's an exclusive event. We have it available for replay in the Facebook group. It's called What to Ask For in Sync. You can just search his name in the Facebook group, and I'll tell you, it helps me in, you know, a significant placement that I received in the past couple of years. I won't say who and I won't say with who, but I didn't know what to do when I got an offer and I watched that video and I just did what I learned from that video. And I can't even tell you how much that, not even in dollars, because it's not even about the dollars, but it really did pay off to me. But yes, in dollars, but it more than dollars. And
Yeah.
so I just want to highly recommend that replay. And so, Jon, thank you so much for that really great introduction and kind of short background into who you are and why you're doing what you do. Can we dig into the book right now and see what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. Would you
Because you
like to?
start talking about basics, but then legacy, I'm like, oh wow, yes,
Oh yeah.
I would like a blueprint for a path to doing something like you just said in a couple. It was a really quick sound bite, but there were a
I
lot of
know.
good things
I
in
shouldn't
there.
have done it. I shouldn't have done it.
It's great. It's so great, and we're super grateful. So yeah, please take it away.
Cool. I guess to start off, a bit of an overview of what to expect. We'll dive straight into the core contents. The purpose of course, um, this first one is to go through the first chapter, and also a bit of an introduction to why the book exists in a little bit more detail. But effectively, the aim is that we're going to do this for about 9 weeks, and it will cover various themes. So that's everything from initial awareness, which is what today is all about, and grounding your foundation, building on that foundation through structure further, sustainability through your career, by looking at what wealth really means for an artist and actually really trying to unpack that term wealth. Everyone throws it around, but what does it actually mean? And really ground that properly. Then moving into power of ownership and leverage, the deal blueprint later down the line, which looks at clarity within your career. Um, and then we move on to systems, growth, meaning from an impact and legacy perspective. And then finally, in the last chapter, we look at the infinite game, which is all about continuity. What do we do later down the line? How do we have a growth mindset in a industry full of question marks, should I say? Um, so, yeah, we're going to the first one, which is this song, and how does value move through the industry? And it should take about 20 to 25 minutes to go through. It's fairly short. And then I'll just open it up to questions, and hopefully you can bring your own experience into this. I would highly encourage it. And then we can just have some Q&As, some case studies, and hopefully I can apply that to your career and help you. That's the idea. So
Wonderful. I'm going to pause the recording just briefly. Okay, Jen, that sounds great though. Thank you for that overview.
no problem. Can you hear me
Okay,
better?
so yes, I think that's going to be good. Um,
Right.
okay, so let's get to it.
Cool. All right then. I'll try not to go too quick. Let me know if I'm going too fast. I'll slow down as well.
And then everybody, when you have questions, please take note of those questions and write them down. And we'll pause for questions. So yeah, please take note of the questions. You can also type the questions in the chat. We won't address them immediately, but we will address them. So yeah, please get your questions ready. Okay, thank you, John.
Perfect. So going back from the start, and hopefully you can hear me nice and clearly. I didn't plan to write this book. It began really as a series of late night notes, half reflections and half reminders to myself, scribbled after meetings that left a taste of unease, or after moments in the studio where I realized how much beauty was being lost to confusion and compromise. Those pages grew into something larger, a map of lessons learned through mistakes, building, and a stubborn refusal to give up on what felt right. The artist blueprint isn't a theory, it's a lived attempt to understand how an artist can remain whole while moving through an industry that rarely rewards wholeness. I've seen talent swallowed by contracts, brilliance diminished by exhaustion, and good people turn bitter because they didn't know another way to survive. I've also seen quiet revolutions, artists who chose to understand the system rather than curse it, who learnt to own their work, to lead their teams, and to build lives that made sense to them. For a long time, I thought success meant proximity to power, bigger budgets, bigger names, bigger rooms. I was wrong. Real success, I learned, is coherence. When your work, your values, and your peace all point in the same direction. The further I stepped into that truth, the clearer that it became that art and structure were not enemies. Systems, when built with integrity, don't trap creativity, they protect it. This book is my way of passing that understanding forward. It's written for the ones still navigating between survival and self-belief, the writers, producers, singers, and founders who sense there must be a more honest path but don't yet see how to build it. You'll find frameworks here about ownership, deal making, revenue, and scaling, but beneath every strategy is something simpler. A reminder that clarity is power and calm is leverage. I don't claim to have all the answers. I've failed enough times to know how temporary certainty can be. But I've learned that when you meet the world with patience, respect, and quiet persistence, doors open that noise could never break down. This is an invitation to build differently, to design your career, your company, and your art from a place of awareness rather than reaction. Take it slow, question it, adapt it, use what serves you, and discard what doesn't. These pages help you create even one piece of work that truly feels yours, free from fear, confusion, or compromise, and it's a job done. Let's build something honest.
Beautiful.
The book grew out of years of questions that wouldn't leave me alone. Questions about fairness, ownership, creativity, and what it really means to live a life of integrity while working inside an industry built on imbalance. When I first began in music, I was driven by instinct. I love sound, emotion, and the connection that art creates between people. But over time, I saw how easily that purity can be lost. I watched artists trade control for comfort, purpose for pressure, and talent for dependency. And I saw myself do the same. This began as my attempt to understand why. I wanted to know how to build a career that was free and sustainable, and one that didn't require sacrifice and peace for progress. These pages come from lessons the hard way, through those mistakes, the rebuilds, the late nights, and all those quiet moments of clarity. They're shaped by every person who ever shared their story with me, every artist who refused to give up, and every experience that reminded me that structure and soul can coexist. And the irony is, this book is not finished, and I hope it will never be. It's a living document. It will change as I do, as the world does, and as new artists add their voices to it. This is how it should be. So, thank you for listening, and for those that will watch this back. I hope it helps you find structure in your chaos, strength in your stillness, and freedom in your design. It's not about becoming something new, it's about remembering who you already are and learning to protect it. Thank you. The quiet beginning. I grew up teaching myself every instrument I could get my hands on. Drums came first, as I previously mentioned, then guitar, saxophone, drums, whatever I could learn. And then I learned and learned and learned even further. There was no plan, no roadmap, just an instinct to understand how music worked piece by piece. I never imagined that one day it would lead me to a studio in Nashville, surrounded by some of the most talented people I had ever met. That session changed everything. We were producing a song I'd co-written, one that I had helped bring to life through a company I founded on a project I'd personally negotiated and secured. Across from me, a Grammy-winning producer, someone I'd looked up to for years, now working beside me as an equal. Around us, a few interns watched quietly, eyes wide, soaking in every detail as the room prepared to create. Everyone arrived, one by one. No egos, no introductions needed. The engineer adjusted a few settings, refining the sound until everyone sat perfectly in balance. The interns moved silently, learning by observation, taking notes, and preparing microphones and cables with quiet focus. The artist, humming softly, beginning to find her sound and flow. We weren't chasing perfection. What we were building was presence. Every note felt intentional, every pause deliberate. It was as if the song already existed and we were simply uncovering it together, layer by layer. Within minutes, the room transformed. The energy shifted from setup to something sacred. A sound began to form, effortless and honest, that rare kind of connection that cannot be forced, the kind that happens only when people start trying and start trusting. I remember sitting there in silence for a moment, watching it unfold. The music, the harmony, the respect, the feeling was pure alignment, art, structure, and intention, all moving together as one. There was no rush to impress, no talk of charts or metrics, no thought of credits or contracts, just a shared purpose to make something beautiful. That night, something in me changed. I realized what I was witnessing, that seamless mix of creativity, discipline, humility, and flow. the very essence of what I'd spent my life chasing. It was everything I believed the creative industry could be, organized without being rigid, free without being chaotic, and powerful without being loud. It was coherence. In that moment, I saw what happens when systems serve art instead of suffocating it, when structure gives creativity somewhere safe to live, when everyone from the producer to the intern is part of the same rhythm. I left Nashville with a quiet conviction. If only I could find a way to bottle up that feeling, to design structures that protect it and help others experience it too, that would be my life's work. This book is that design. It's about control. It's not about control. It's about clarity, not about success, but coherence. The point where you're at, where your art, purpose, and peace move in unison. That was the quiet beginning. Introduction. The music industry doesn't lack talent. It lacks truth. For every artist who succeeds, there are hundreds who never get to make it past survival. Not because they weren't good enough, but because they never learned how the system works. They were told to focus on the art, not the numbers, to stay humble, to wait their turn, to be grateful for exposure. Somewhere along the way, the industry convinced creators that money and meaning were opposites, and that control belonged to someone else. It took me years to understand that this belief wasn't an accident, it was design. Once you see the patterns, everything changes. You begin to realize that what keeps most artists stuck isn't a lack of opportunity, but a lack of structure. The difference between the artist who burns out and the one who builds a legacy is not talent or luck, it's systems. So I wrote this because I believe the systems can be taught, built, and shared. It's not about chasing that record deal or viral moment. It's about creating a foundation that allows you to have a living out of your creativity without losing yourself in that process. We won't find shortcuts. Instead, it will be frameworks, clear and simple structures to help you understand the ownership, protect the rights, and grow with intention. You'll learn how to read contracts, negotiate from strength, and think like a founder, not a follower. You'll see that every career, no matter how artistic, still runs on principles of clarity, cash flow, and control. But beyond the tactics, this book is about something deeper. If you're to take anything away, it's about coherence. When your art, your values, and your peace are aligned, you move differently. You stop chasing validation, you start building value. You begin to lead with stillness instead of urgency, and you create not just for recognition, but for impact. This book will not tell you who to be. It's not for me to do. It will show you how to build a life that feels true, one where you can create freely, unfairly, and grow responsibly. Don't want you to just survive the industry. I want you to outgrow it. I want you to build systems that are bigger than the contracts and stronger than the trends. It's not a path to fame, but a path to freedom. The system behind the song, why most artists never get paid what they deserve. Every song you have ever loved was built inside a system. Behind the melody and emotion sits a network of contracts, companies, rights and agreements that decide who earns and who doesn't. Most listeners will never see that structure, and most artists are introduced to it only after they have given everything away. For many, it starts with a dream and ends with confusion. The first deal feels like validation, the first placement feels like success, and the first check feels like proof that things are working. But beneath that surface, something quieter happens. Ownership shifts, percentages are traded, and futures are rewritten. The problem is not that artists lack talent or discipline. The problem is that we were never taught how value actually moves. They learned how to create, but not how to control. They were taught to think emotionally in an industry that functions mechanically. Once you see the system for what it is, everything changes. The music industry is not a single entity. It is a network of incentives shaped by publishing companies, labels, distributors, streaming services, and collection societies. Each piece exists to serve its own purpose. When you do not know how those pieces interact, you become one of them. This book exists to show another way. The hidden cost of exposure. Artists are often told that exposure is currency. How many times have we have we all heard that throughout our career? A lot. That early work should be free and payment can come later. It's one of the most dangerous ideas in the creative economy. Put simply, exposure, when not paired with structure, is a slow erosion of power. It teaches you to trade certainty for attention, and attention fades. What remains are the contracts you signed when you were too grateful to question them. Every professional in this industry understands leverage. Labels use it, platforms use it, managers and publishers use it, yet artists are rarely taught how to recognize or build it. Real leverage begins with clarity. You cannot negotiate from confusion, and you cannot protect what you don't understand. When you learn to see your art as an asset, you start to ask better questions. Who owns this? Who benefits when it is used? And who collects the money when it earns? Those questions aren't about greed, they're about dignity. To understand why artists are underpaid, you have to understand how the game is scored. Every stream, sync, and sale generates revenue that passes through layers of intermediaries before it ever reaches the creator. By the time it does, what remains is often a fraction of the total, yet many artists celebrate that fraction because it's more than they ever had before. This is how the system sustains itself. It rewards ignorance with small victories. It hides complexity behind excitement, and it convinces you that access is ownership, when in truth, they're opposites. The moment you begin to track the flow of money, the illusion breaks. You see that the people earning the most are often not the ones creating the work, but the ones who structured it. Ownership is not just about legal rights. It is a philosophy. It's a way of thinking that asks, what do I keep and what do I give away? Every time you create something, you are producing equity. Every time you sign something, you are transferring it. When you start to see your creativity as equal, you behave differently. You plan ahead, you build frameworks, you document, you negotiate from intention rather than impulse. The artists who thrive in this new economy are not necessarily the most famous, they're the most structured. They understand that freedom comes from systems, not spontaneity. The shift from emotion to architecture. Art is emotional, business is architectural. Those creators struggle because they try to build a business emotionally. They trust too quickly. They rely on hope instead of due diligence. They confuse visibility with value. And when things fall apart, they blame themselves instead of the structure that failed them. Learning to build systems does not make you less creative. It makes you more stable. It allows you to take bigger risks in your art because your foundation can now hold them. When you understand structure, you stop negotiating from fear. You start designing from clarity. Freedom is not the absence of structure. It is structure built with intention. Every artist wants freedom, but few realize that freedom requires discipline. It requires saying no to what feels urgent so that you can build what lasts. It means understanding the mechanics of your world so it can play within the game on your terms. True independence is not rebellion, it's self-governance. There's one lesson I've learned from inside this business, is that systems will not change for you. You have to learn how to operate within it and, when the time is right, build one of your own. So, the key takeaways before we get into the workbook and I'm sure some questions. Talent without structure leads to burnout. Exposure without ownership leads to dependency. Freedom without discipline leads to chaos. The artist's blueprint begins here with awareness. Before you can build anything lasting, you must see the world as it is, not as you wish it to be. The first step is not about blame, it's about clarity. And once you understand the system behind the song, you're ready to design one that serves you instead of the other way around. I'll leave it there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, John. And how about you stop sharing for now? I really liked what I heard. Clarity is power,
Mm,
calm is leverage, strength and stillness. Coherence is something that I looked into years ago and have heard that word, um, come back to me in different phases of my life.
mm,
Um, Serving the art, um, the founder mentality, not follower mentality, dignity versus greed,
mm.
emotion to architecture. I mean, these are really great stuff. Great, just kind of foundational things for us to start thinking about. I'm wondering if anybody in the room, how are you all feeling about all that? Any questions, comments?
Some very clear thinking. Um, I'm always seeking clarity, but the importance of foundation is so great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Susie.
Go ahead, Deb.
Oh gosh, I love this. I mean, it seems like it's so grounded, um, and profound. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you,
Wonderful.
Deb.
Any questions? I think the questions will come when we dig into some of these, the nitty gritty of what really happens in the biz. Tabitha says, John, how did you survive the industry?
That's such a good question. And so layered. Firstly, thank you for
in
the
in
question.
like I don't know, in a short amount of time, how can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, that could be a whole other
It's
Zoom, I'm
loaded,
sure.
loaded question.
Yeah, it is. Um, Firstly, thank you, Tabitha, and thank you for joining. I really appreciate you being here. Um, how did I survive the industry? Um, I mean, such a great question. Honestly, I think patience and perseverance, to be honest with you. I've been, I say lucky now, but it felt unfortunate at the time to have gone through the various cycles of the sector. And what I mean by that is, there's the high highs and there's the low lows. The high highs is when it's going really well, and money's coming in and things are going great. As I said before, there's the illusion, and when that falls apart, you realize that actually the foundation was a little bit shaky. Um, Started, I've experienced that side of it, um, and then, it doing okay, but thinking of how do I scale it to then just scraping by, um, and then being completely broke. And I'll be honest with you, you have to survive every single part of those phases. And the reason I say that is because what often comes, and I learned this as well going through it when I had some success with a project. You think, okay, cool, the next deal's going to come along. Complacency gone. The deal didn't come. You're saying when you're riding it at the top, you think this would. I'll use another example that you see top athletes, performing in big sports events when they're young, and then when their career finally ends because they peak so quickly, they get an injury and they're out and they're broke. And it's because they hadn't prepared in advance that they might have to go down different streams, and so stuff like that. So in terms of surviving the industry. Firstly, it's a case of perseverance, and also understanding who you are and ensuring that everything is then aligned with that. Um, and with that, it's really hard, to be honest with you, because you've got to say no. And I mentioned that in the book about saying no, but saying no to some really, really tempting deals, and that was so hard. But saying no, I can't take this anymore. I need to work on myself even more and figure out what it is that I am about. So it's super grounded. What's my foundation? and let's strip it all the way back down to the core, and then we rebuild again.
I mean,
So how I survived was basically going back to my foundation.
and you say knowing who you are and finding yourself and being yourself. That knowing who you are is kind of a complicated thing. I mean, that's what we talked about when we, met a couple, days ago. It was just like aligning with that, but first knowing who I am first, so that I know what I'm aligning with.
Yeah.
And that's why you say, saying no because you had to put yourself first.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the other side of it as well, where um look, if you lose everything tomorrow, so what? If you've built a great foundation, they can't take that away from you. No one can build no one can take your foundation away from you, and no one can take away, the skills, the knowledge and expertise and your life experiences that you have built and grown together. They may be able to take your business, they may be able to take your assets, your money, great, but they can't take what got you to that point. So if you ever had to rebuild again, you're always building from a place of strength because it's always aligned. And that's really, where that comes from.
Wow. Yeah. You're making decisions aligned with who you are.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you, Tabitha, for that question. Anyone else? Any kind of real world types of examples? Because this all sounds great, Jon, but when it really comes down to it, it can be kind of difficult to really put it into practice.
It can. And let's take a scenario where it's a very tempting record label deal. And it's where a lot of places fall down because it's that urgency of that success. Like you're going and passing up the arc, and you're very, very excited. You only then realize 5 years down the line, you've been signed into a 3-year record label deal or 3-album deal. And the way you're marketed is not who you are anymore. So what do you do in that early stage? And really, where the answer to that is effectively you have to strip it back and you have to have an understanding of your system and your structure as to what is coming in and what is going out so that you can negotiate from a place of strength. Okay. So firstly, if you know who you are, you then know what your non-negotiables are. One, how it could be as simple as how you want to be treated. And that includes how you wish to be perceived when you're then marketed online. If you have a certain, thing of, I don't want to be aligned with an alcohol brand, for example, that is your foundation, that is your principle. You say no. And it's really, really important to know that so that you can state that early. And I think often where these deals go wrong is where people aren't aware of that and they sign into the deal and they haven't clearly stated, look, this is who I am. These are my non-negotiables. I want to work with you. We can work together, but these are the things I can't compromise on. I'm willing to compromise on this, but not that. And that could be ownership. That could be, such as your percentage on the back end. On a record label deal, it could be, okay, we've got this record label deal coming in. Instead of a 3-album deal, let's see if we can negotiate that down. And you're not having my rights for perpetuity because that's not in my practice and my beliefs. You can have it for 10 years, maybe, if that's what you wish to do. But I want reversion rights on that so then it comes back to me. Right. So it's about then, if you've got that foundation and those principles, then you can negotiate from a place of strength. And equally, I would say with that, when you then own kind of your own system and your data sets and stuff like that, you know what's coming in and what's going out. It's much easier to negotiate with any party because you're like, this is what I'm bringing in. I know my numbers. This is what I'm bringing in. This is who I am. These are my non-negotiables. Let's start there. And it's
Yeah.
very, very clear and transparent.
I mean, just from what I can observe, there's a level of feeling powerless or like not having the right to say anything or ask for anything, or maybe people are just getting their start. They're like, they feel like maybe this is a big break, or like this is, there's especially people like taking, they've took a class here and there, or maybe they're
Hmm?
just getting their foot in the door, and they're just kind of seeing how the business works. A lot of people just feel like they don't have any right to kind of even say anything. And that's it kind of goes with Chris's question about keeping a level head. What's good practice for sustaining a level head throughout highs and lows from your own personal experience? What routines do you swear by no matter highs or lows? Because yeah, I mean, it depending on where people are in their journey, if you get your first placement, your first representation offer, um,
Mm.
or maybe it's your first um, international ad campaign or something, or major film or whatever it is, and that kind of highs and lows is kind of like you said, the first step is clarity. You can't negotiate in a confused state. So,
Yeah,
from your own personal experience, do you have any routines that you swear by to keep level headed in the highs and lows?
I do. And just before that, just to um, go on the point of the right to question, the right to ask. What I would say to that is that all aside, you always have the right to be who you are, and that's a non-negotiable. So,
Amen.
I get that, artists feel like they're powerless. That is the illusion that the industry is quite clearly painting, because it's this power struggle between the artist that's going up and the majors, or it doesn't even have to be the majors. It's not saying that majors are bad, because they're not. At the right time, they're a very good strategic partner if you know how to leverage them. Um, but you always have the right to be who you are, and the right to ask questions and to gain clarity. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And anyone will respect anyone for doing so.
Mm.
Um,
Thank you
so
for that. Thank you.
yeah,
That's
no,
important.
it's so important. And there is that illusion where you're like, and I've felt it, where I'm like, oh well, who am I to negotiate this? Who am I to say that I can demand, request this? And what I've, learning from the other side of it is that, um, yeah, you do have the right to be who you are,
Yeah.
more than anything. So to answer that question from Chris, let me just find it. Sorry, it's good practice for level head throughout the highs and lows. Okay, it's gonna sound a little bit funny, this one. Okay, so basically, um, I have the easiest way to put this is reflection. And to answer that question in terms of how do I swear by keeping a level head through my highs and lows, um, no matter what, it is a case of having time out for reflection, and that's it's easier said than done. It's incredibly hard to do in practice. Um, I'll tell you why, because when a deal goes sideways, you're going through a legal battle or whatever it may be. It's on your mind 24/7. It's terrifying, truly. And it's incredibly uncomfortable because you feel like everything you've built is potentially going to get lost. Um, so to ground yourselves in those moments, what I did was I forced myself to say no, um, and give myself space and time. Um, and that meant slower replies to people. It meant creating space, increasing that time gap, and giving time for my brain to one, process what's going on in its own way. Um, and secondly, then formulate a plan of how I'm going to cross that challenge. So for me, I find the easiest way to do it is that when I'm faced with a very stressful or complicated scenario, is to strip the how I strip the emotion out of it is that I think incredibly logically. I'll pull myself out and reflect and think, okay, almost like a checklist, kind of going through this. What do I control? What do I know in this deal, and what don't I? And what I don't control, I probably don't need to worry about it because I can't do anything about it. And that's quite often all the emotion. But the things you can control, is the tone, the time you take to respond, your own patience and ethics on how you wish to respond. You can control a lot of communication by staying true to your values and saying, hang on a minute, I get you that you're under pressure and this is urgent, but that's unprofessional. Let's create some professional boundaries here. So in those moments, reflection is really, really important. And part of that is not just personal reflection, but also taking time out to go for a walk, ground yourself with people and the environment, and go and do something that you love. For me, it might be I'll turn around and go and play on the piano. I just forget about it all and I'll just do that. Or I'll put my headphones in and I'll listen to music, and I've got like a top few tracks that are just they like do something to me. They're
Yeah.
amazing. I love them. And That's what I do. And I'll go for a walk. The gym doesn't really do it for me, to be honest. It does for some, but I find that I'm best when I'm calm and relaxed and I can think really clearly and slowly. Now, the same goes with the highs, because when you're in the highs, there's the trap and the risk that then you're caught in the ego, and it's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous because you become blind to your own career, to be honest. And if anything can be more dangerous to you, to your career, it's yourself at that point. It's, that's if you're not grounded, that's where your communication changes. You might treat people differently. And as we see in later chapters, effectively, there's different types of capital within the industry, and a bit of a sneak peek is one of them is relational capital. No one wants to work with someone that they don't like because they're horrible to them. It might get you through the door initially, great, but it won't last forever. And the relationships will last longer than the contracts. So just to ground that out, it's, yeah, always reflection and grounded clarity.
Wow. Thank you so much, John. I really appreciate that. Wondering if anybody else has questions, comments, concerns, any real world issues or comments that you would love John's opinion or input on. Now is the time. John, you also mentioned something about a bit of a workbook maybe that can
Yeah.
do. Is that also available for the people watching the replay?
Yeah. They
Okay.
can access it anytime they want. It will be live on the site. I can share the
Wonderful.
link if you wish.
Okay, great. And tell us a little bit about what that is. And again, anybody have questions? We're open to questions now. Pretty much Q&A for the rest of the time. And Tabitha does have one question, but John, tell us just a little bit about this link that you're giving us.
Sure.
Yeah,
Let me see if I can share the screen. Actually, it might make it a little bit easier. Um, a second.
great question, Tabitha. We can get into that in just a moment.
So I'm just like battling with all the screens.
It's all good.
Okay, so I think I've found it now.
And thank you everybody for being here. Visit us also at musicianspeersupport.com and also John's website, the Artist Blueprint, artistsblueprint.com. Okay, go ahead, John.
Hopefully that's shared. It should say Artist Blueprint Workbook at the top.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, just for context as well. Yes, there's a book, but um, all these resources are also, there's a load of free resources here as well. So the free workbooks there. This will also be released as a podcast audiobook, so you're welcome to listen to it for free. You don't have to get the book; it's there if you wish. There's options for everyone effectively. But the point of this workbook is basically to ground what goes on through the chapters. So You don't have to necessarily do this now. If you want to, you can. What you'll probably struggle with during this call and session is doing the revenue streams bit because you need to, that takes a bit of time. But basically, the idea is understanding your current identity within the industry, and there's a reason for that. Um, Looking at then the revenue streams. So, that could be from Spotify, it could be from YouTube, um, you name it. It could also be. I'm actually going to do a larger sheet of this to make it more detailed, so that you can really, really get into the details of it if you've got a larger catalog. But effectively, how I do this is that I'll put the asset in there, and then I'll put the value that is coming that it's generating each year, and then the next column, the IP ownership. One is the yes or no. Do you own it? Do you fully own it? Yes or no? And if you don't, what are the percentages? And the reason being is then you have clarity in terms of, where you are, and what that means later on in the checklist. And then stability. What we mean by that is how volatile is your income stream? So is this a check that's coming in every quarter through the PROs? Great. Is it sufficient? If not, why not? Can you do anything to push that forward? It's basically like little reflection points. If it is stable, great. That's now a reliable revenue stream. As when you look at, and this is kind of more from a separate side, but I'm just going to touch into it because I initially, before writing this version of the book, the original version was very, very business heavy, and I decided to leave that for the one afterwards. The reason being is because it was quite full on and daunting. But what I mean by stability, as a bit of an overview, without it getting too detailed, is effectively when you value a catalog, they have valuation multipliers that are put on them. They can be quite high. You might be 15% or higher, maybe, sorry, 15x or higher, maybe 20x. It depends on the value of the catalog, really. But the point is they have a valuation multiple on them. So say, for example, you've got something that is stable doing like 100 grand a year. Cool. Well, that on an EBITDA multiplier, now you know the value of your catalog just off that one song. That's how these deals will work. So this is why ownership is so important, because if you own it and you own that revenue stream that's coming through, you can then leverage that because it's an asset that's cash flowing, and that is strong when it comes to negotiating deals later down the line. So just for kind of context as to why that's there, it's super important. So the constraints audit, that's basically in terms of, as it says, kind of the current limit on your progress. It could be multiple things. Is it time, money, skills? What is it? Helps you kind of identify the reasons and current constraints of where you are at. Then the core structural issue. Try and keep it to a sentence or two things. What do you actually think is structurally wrong? Is it that you don't have a foundation? You don't have a uh, uh, like a CRM so that you can have a mailing list. I don't know, whatever it is, but it's specifically naming what that is so that you can then look at that further. There's then a 10-point benchmarking, basically identifying from weak to strong, where would you put yourself on that scale? All the way from, do you know yourself as an artist? Really interesting question. It's a massive curveball, actually, because as we said, most people don't know yet. And what does that mean in terms of discipline? How are you there? Where's your strategic focus? And more importantly, at the end, from a reflection standpoint, how often do you reflect on your career, where you're at and where you want to be? Then finally, that kind of summarizes into a nice little bit at the end for you to take away and then compare. Maybe you do this audit once a quarter, twice a year, once a year, doesn't matter. But it helps you kind of really understand where you're at and where you want to go. So that's the workbook
Excellent.
for the first chapter anyway.
Yes. Okay, great. So we're just kind of doing an assessment as to where we're at right now,
Yeah,
which is great.
all linking
Excellent.
to awareness.
Okay, and wonderful. So let's go ahead and stop that share now. Tabitha has one question here. How does the industry respond to artists saying no? How do you find the balance in the negotiation process? And again, this is going to be case to case, as you know, industry responds to no. I mean, um, yeah, I mean, it's put yourself first, but that fear again is like, okay, what if I say no? What am I shooting myself in the foot if I say no?
Um, I think there's different layers of it to answer honestly. Um, I think you can always say no because ultimately, and the reason I say that is because ultimately, no matter how amazing the deal is, if it doesn't align with you anyway or your career, you should say no. Because why would you say yes? And at that point you've lost nothing. You've only gained something because you're back aligned with who you're supposed to be. So at that point, I would say no is always an option. How's the industry going to respond to that? Well, those partners that don't align with you, you won't work with.
Hmm.
But those that you do align with, you'll have a very good and successful career with.
Hmm.
Um, and on that note of career, to ground this out as well, and what I'd like you to kind of reflect on with this worksheet, um, before looping back into this question, is a career for an artist means a lot of different things for different people. It doesn't mean that you have to be a touring artist. It doesn't mean that you've got to be selling millions of records. It's like, what does it mean for you? And I've seen a variety where it's the case of, an artist, they would like to do a gig at their local pub, and as a result of that, they've got like this social impact aspect of what they do, and then they're giving back to the community because they're doing community projects as a result of that, and that's what makes them feel fulfilled. And they're very successful as a result of it. And then for someone else, they want to have a go on tour. So someone else, they want to do millions of streams, they want to sell millions of records, great. For others, they might want to build a career so they can leverage it into a clothing line or a perfume line or whatever. You name it. There's so many options of how you can use your audience moving forward. But the point is there's a completely different career path for each of them, which is why it's so important to ground that out. Um, but yeah, so to kind of circle back as well as to saying no. Um, I think there are some very, very hard no's, that I think you should always stand by. Um, Safeguarding risks, huge. There's ever an issue with that, that's a hard stop. And that's, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that's tied into those foundations from a legal standpoint. You should never be penalized for saying no or stopping something on the basis that you feel uncomfortable and it's not right. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
And if that's said otherwise, you're around the wrong people.
Right.
And
And would it
yeah.
be fair to say that the industry is diverse and wide enough that saying that you can stay true to your morals and aligned with who you are and say no appropriately and still be successful?
Oh, 100%. You could be what is deemed as whatever perfect is, and there'll still be someone out there somewhere that will hate on you for it.
Right.
Someone will do it, you know, because there's people that sit on all sorts of different sides of everything. There's like that classic yin and yang,
Yeah.
people love it, they hate it. I think that's inevitable with everywhere. You'll always find your people, and the people that align with you.
Yeah.
So yeah, honestly, that's why I say it's quite layered. You'll have these various deals that seem very, very exciting, but ultimately, go back to your foundation, and then you've lost nothing.
Yeah. Beautiful. A lot of the principles that we talked about in musicians peer support in the clubhouse days, carve your own path. Um, everybody has accolades or not, we're all humans. It's not so
Mhm.
much about the power that you yield, but how you treat another human being.
Yeah.
And, you know, we saw a lot of people from the industry come around and stick around. And that really speaks to that question is, I had to say no a bunch of times in my career. I talk about it a lot in our Patreon community. But yeah, that is who I am. And I can't be anything other than who I am. And who I am is evolving now. And I'd have to learn that. So, the first thing you said when we started the session about knowing who you are and the clarity of that and aligning with that, as a foundation. I think that's a really great place for us to start this series, and just something to think about moving forward as we do it. Um, I'm wondering if anybody else has questions. Final last call for questions because we're getting close to time here. Jon, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about or wrap up in terms of conversation?
Just that if people feel comfortable doing so, you're welcome to share a specific scenario if you want to kind of, um, yeah, share it with us, and then I might be able to help in terms of how that then aligns. That might be something for the later chapters, but happy to
Sure.
explore whatever you wish during this time.
Sure. Susie, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm a little off topic, but right now I'm trying to build my catalog,
Okay, cool.
and the metadata issue is I'm trying to use something called MP3 tag. Are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it, but I don't use it on a regular basis though.
Okay, what is your recommendation?
Currently for metadata, um, to be honest, I don't really use external parties for it at the moment. I tend to do it all in-house by it could be as simple as I'm going into the general information of that file, or prior to exporting it from whichever DAW I'm doing, that's where my core metadata really lies within the file. And then after that, if I'm then uploading it onto various platforms and services, I will input it manually from there. Um, the reason being as well, and the reason I say that is I have a lot of this, I take it with a pinch of salt in the sense that I haven't tried all the various metadata platforms out there. But I've often found that when I've tried to use them, it hasn't captured everything that I wanted. So then when I went to then distribute it through one of the DSPs and it was put on Spotify or wherever, there was then actually core data that I would have liked in there that wasn't in there. I'll give an example. Um, you know, producers, that's really important that the producers are named on there, not just the artist. So then when it's collected through your PROs, it all kind of links up really nicely. Whereas traditionally the real core of it is like who's the writer, who's the composer, who's the performing artist. And like you can really then get into the details of the metadata of like who owns the copyright, who's the label, who's the publisher, what's your ISRC code and all of this other stuff. Really get into the blitz and the detail of it. Um, it's just habit. I prefer to do it manually when I go through it.
Yeah. Um, Jon, on the level of like a music supervisor
Hmm.
and who's like, pitching to major TV shows and, maybe is like putting together a library and stuff like that. Like things start to get really busy and
Mm,
like it seems like you're probably spinning a bunch of plates.
yeah,
Um, this obviously, you wouldn't write this book if the process wasn't the same, if you weren't keeping those same principles. But what are
yeah.
some of the things that on an artist level that somebody in that type of position deals with that maybe we artists, aren't seeing or understanding that is aligned with the principles around this book?
Sure. So I'm a little bit of uh, a data nerd is probably the easiest way to put it. It can be super boring. I'll be honest with you, but it's super important. Look, I'm basically at the point where I'm trying to move what is my very old system of putting everything into an Excel or Google Sheet onto a piece of software that allows me to scale this more seamlessly. And then sure, there's options out there, but effectively what I do is that one, I'll reflect on each quarter. I've got very specific things that I will audit and look at, so that I'm not doing it all at once because it can be very overwhelming. So I just slowly chip at it each time. And then I have a very clear process. So if I take myself back to like, I don't know, you're exporting something from a film score, and it really got drilled into me because of this, to be honest, because you've then got to have your cue sheets off the back of that, which is where more data and information sits. That goes to the PROs because it then effectively tells um, the PROs where your music was placed for how long and when and who it's owned by and all the other detail. And effectively, the way that I go about it with my methodology is that everything from like my logic sessions to how I export things, it's incredibly OCD'd, and there's a very specific process and framework that has to be followed. And if it doesn't, the entire thing falls apart because I never know where to find anything. Um,
Mm,
and it seems ridiculous when you first start, but you know, when your catalog as your catalog continues to expand, you're so grateful for it because you're like, okay, cool. I've done this a million and one times because I know the pathway to get to this file. Cool, let's go do it. Um, that could be, you know, as well then having a subfolder of all your one-stop tracks for we talked about sync before, you know, for sync specifically. So then you're not having to pull all the other versions. You go back into your Logic session, they're like, oh, you know what? I love what you did, but I only want the instrumental. I don't have the instrumental. I've got to go back into the Logic session. It might even be corrupted because it's like from 5 years ago. We don't know if it's opened. So, you know, it's all of that drama. So yeah, having a very, very clear process and framework. There's a folder hierarchy that I use actually, and I got it from the Recording Academy, the Grammy Academy. See if I can find it. If I can, I'll share it.
mm,
But that's literally the exact folder hierarchy that I use for film and music generally, aligned with their standards. And then when it comes to then the process of then releasing it, there's another process that goes through in terms of checking the data, making sure that's all aligned. And it's basically like a tick box exercise. And then finally, from a catalog perspective, that is a um, spreadsheet, super boring.
mhm,
But yeah, it's got everything in there.
mhm, mhm,
All the cues, everything that's been every asset basically. It's
mhm. So, I mean, basically what you're saying is the admin part and just like the data part of running a business like that is just a lot. And so
Mm,
when we artists are like coming at you with this song and that song, we have to understand that you guys are also dealing with all those things. I'm reminded by Tabitha's question and just the whole topic of going back to saying no. I learned through therapy that sometimes saying no to other people is saying yes to ourselves.
yeah.
And I think that that's a good way to kind of say also what you're saying here. And that
Mhm.
includes on your level too, is you have to deal with all those things. So if somebody's going to come to you and not be organized, maybe let's say, or unprofessional, some level of unprofessionalism, you have to, you know, put yourself first and say no to that person because you just can't afford to do that. And when you say like slower responses, that's also really great too to understand that on all levels, we do have to take care of ourselves, and that email can wait, um, because it's we can easily be overwhelmed because a lot of times it's like you're self-employed and you can work like 24/7.
Mm.
Do you put hours to your day? Do you cap it? Do you cap out? Do you clock out at a certain time, or are you like some people I know, is it me, that like wake up at 1 o'clock and like be like, hey, that one song, or hey, like having a production meeting at like 1:30 in the morning in the middle of the night before I brush my teeth. Trying not to. Do you clock out? How do you manage all of that?
I do. I'm better at it now than I used to be. Previously, I would be fielding calls every weekend, crazy hours. Um, yeah, and it really got to the point where I got very burnt out as a result of it. We're talking like juggling UK, US, Australia calls all the time, and it was so much. And then by the end of it, I was like, I've got nothing left in the tank. I'm exhausted. What am I even doing? Um, and yeah, so now, I'd say I've got a fairly like not too rigid schedule, but I do have a schedule which I know works well for me. For example, like I'm one of those people that works great in the mornings, like really good early in the morning. So I get up at crazy o'clock. I start my day there, and the reason being is because then there's no emails, no one's trying to contact or anything like that. It's just super quiet, and I can get a load of my own stuff done without any distractions. Um, and then I have a hard cutoff. And I've also been harsher with, taking phone calls, even taking meetings. I rarely take meetings now. I will rarely take phone calls, unless it's absolutely essential. And the reason being is because often it gets in the way of flow. So I'm one of them that once I'm in the zone, I'm just like dialed in. And I still have to remind myself on a regular, you haven't eaten yet. You should probably go. But that's just because
Yes.
I'm so deep into my work and
Right.
I'm like obsessed. And
Yeah,
I'm
we talk
really
about that in
really
MPS a lot. Like set that
yeah,
alarm and please eat, step away and eat, please.
yeah, literally. So that's the bit I'm not so good at, to be honest. But I'm getting better. Um,
But you do
but
put a
yeah,
heart out at the end of the day.
hard out, yeah. And there's non-negotiables in terms of when I'll take meetings and calls, and if I do, it's at a very specific and certain time.
So
That's
you
already
do put those healthy boundaries.
yeah. I won't usually accept them outside of that unless it's extreme circumstances,
Right.
and they're very very close a colleague of mine, and then I might bend the rule just as
Hmm.
a the odd one.
Yeah. I guess I just have like maybe one last question. Again, anybody else with questions? We're gonna start to wrap it up now. John, what if, let's say you're working with a group of people, or there's, a bunch of colleagues, or maybe you're in a community or something, and there is somebody that you just don't like their vibe, you don't like what they did or what they're doing or something like that, but you still want to be part of that group, you want to work on that project, you want to stay in that community. Have you seen that situation, and what do you recommend doing? Because I mean, I always give it a recommendation when people come to me with that, like, oh, this person, do I work with them? Like, do I have to deal with them? Like, they're not so bad. They didn't really cross me, but like, I just don't like their vibe. Kind of like having to be around, or maybe even having to work with people that you don't necessarily like.
Yeah. So it's a really good question. Um, I think there's also a difference between um there they may be someone that you might not share a drink with, but are incredibly good from a business perspective, and you're on a shared mission and you're going forward. And there may be some people that you can it's kind of like the opposite. You can have a drink with them, but they really do not share the same values, the direction at all, but they're a great laugh and they do everything from a social perspective, and you love them to death.
Right.
So there are those two kind of categories to kind of take in mind, and that's okay. And sometimes you get both that come together, and that's a joy. It's quite rare though. Sometimes it's usually one or the other.
Right.
But in the few opportunities that it does, that's fantastic. Um, what I would say is you're always going to have people that don't always see eye to eye. And maybe there is some room for some slight compromise. The only places where your core foundations and your principles are not aligned, and at that point, I would say, look, I would basically just create distance, and it's just not going to work. We could
Yeah.
still be very professional, but
Right.
in terms of from an inner circle perspective, I can't really let that influence me.
Yeah.
So from a personal perspective, and I know it's been said quite a few times that that where you end up being is kind of or what influences your environment are like the people that you can count on your one hand. And it's incredibly true. If you think about the five people that you speak to and contact on the most regular basis, it gives you a good idea in terms of where you are, either from a career perspective or equally where you are with yourself. And they can be different five people, but the point being is like they're the people that you go to on a regular basis, you get mentorship and advice from, and that you're just around in terms of a presence. And I think if you do let people in those five that aren't specifically aligned, it can completely change the trajectory of where you're going. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that those five, I'd say it's kind of a little bit more like sacred in a way. Like you got to really keep them close.
Right.
Um, and yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what I do anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love what you say, create distance. That you can still work together, you be professional, still be, in working environments. But that creating distance thing is great because you're not burning bridges.
No,
You're just, holding space. And, as women, minorities, we talk about taking space, taking up space and holding space for ourselves. So that creating distance doesn't need to mean running away from a situation, but rather creating space for yourself.
yeah, absolutely. And everyone evolves, as we mentioned earlier, and just because you might not align that particular chapter, 2 chapters, 3 chapters, how many of the chapters down the line, it might align really nicely again. And I
Yeah.
found that, so yeah, always treat people how you want to be treated. And just keep it super simple. And if distance has to be created, you create that professionally and in a healthy way. But yeah, I'm not really one for burning bridges. It's not my nature.
Yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Susie says, thanks so much for your wisdom. Gretchen says, thank you very much for all your great insights, very helpful. So yes, on behalf of everybody in the room and everybody watching the replay, I just want to thank you. Everybody give it up for Jon Altham one more time for the recording. And John, stick around. We'll end the recording, but we'll just hang out in the room for a minute. Um, Anything else you wanted to say for the recording?
No, all good.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Well,
time.
thank
I
you.
really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And everybody watching the recording, please visit John at artistsblueprint.com. Also musicianspeersupport.com. If you want to make a donation, you can do that through musicianspeersupport.com and just write that it's for John. You can also join our Patreon. Anybody who's in the room, you can get a free one-on-one consultation. Anybody watching the replay, come see me for a free consultation. MPS at musicianspeersupport.com. So thanks everybody for watching. Also, if you are watching the replay, please comment below. Let us know what you think about what you saw, any kind of insights or thoughts about it. Thank you so much. And everybody, one last time, let's give it up for Jon Altham as we wrap up the recording. Bye, everybody.